One, I think, is one of the things about anti-imperialism as an idea is that it has become increasingly confused in terms of the last 100 years. And I think from when it was first written about, I think from the 1930s until the 1980s, the United States left was largely dominated by parties, organizations, and individuals who looked towards the Soviet Union or Mao's China as a form of inspiration, as an opposition, an emancipatory society as people are describing it. I think the theory of anti-imperialism in terms of opposition to the imperial interests of your own country and its plunder abroad has tended to overlap with political support for organizations and countries resisting U.S. imperialism for quite a long time, whether it was in the 1960s or the 1980s or whenever. Especially when those organizations resisting the U.S. imperialism also look to the Soviet Union or to Maoist politics. And I think when you have the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc at the end of the 1880s and the beginning of the 1990s, and you have the transformation of China into what looks like the world's most capitalist country with thousands of sweatshops and also thousands of strikes that are repressed every year, I think there was two mistakes that were open to the left. One of them was described earlier in terms of, one is to continue to associate any opposition, anybody opposed to U.S. imperialism with progressive politics of some kind. And that was described at points, small groups of people supported Saddam Hussein or whatever, or Bolshevik. But I think in reality, one of the largest problems, if not the largest problem of anti-war activists who consistently opposed what the United States had done to Central America in the 1990s, what Noam Chomsky talks about when he wrote a book, I forgot what it was called, something about humanitarian intervention or something like that.
Military humanism.
Yeah, military humanism in the 1990s when Bill Clinton's interventions in Bosnia, bombing of Yugoslavia and Serbia during the war over Kosovo was increasingly actually supported by much of what had been the left in the United States as necessary. And I think with some distance to rehabilitating military intervention and overcoming the Vietnam syndrome before the attacks on September 11th gave Bush the cover to do what he's done in Iraq. I think I want to comradely disagree with some of the stuff Chris said. I think that the left has to do more that engage in an examination of our mistakes and despair, although of course mistakes are something we should look at. And I think that's because the left isn't just about organizations and individuals. It's about a process that's taking place in society where millions of people are radicalizing and also struggling against injustices in this society in the United States and around the world. In that regard, I think there's a great deal of work to do for us in terms of discussing the politics that we want the left to have, but I think we need to be engaged with those struggles that are happening around the world. For example, there are debates going on in Venezuela today about what the future of that movement should look like. And I think the left has to actively engage in participation of that. In the United States, our most important obligation, I think, is against our own government having anything to do with telling anyone in Venezuela what they should do. But I think in terms of in Venezuela, there's political arguments about what direction the movement should take. Should workers have more control over industry? Is it enough to have an increased welfare state? The misiones that are being organized in Venezuela, there's similar debates happening elsewhere, and there's certainly debates within the anti-war movement here in the United States, which we can't abstain on, in terms of there are people in the anti-war movement who don't think we should be for troops out now. There are questions related, for example, it was much easier in some ways to oppose the invasion of Iraq initially than the occupation, because large sections of the media told us that now U.S. credibility is on the line and everything, and that you can't pull out because there'll be disaster and everything else. It's time, the very last sentence I'll say is this, that if you look at the, I'll just leave it at that, I'll come back later.